Welcome to today's Seidokan Saturday. I want to talk a little bit about teaching hierarchy, teaching principles. One of the reasons that a lot of martial arts switched, for example, the pinyan katas, pinyan shodan, nidan, sandan, yondan, godan, and especially when Funakoshi changed them to heian katas when he took them to Japan, has to do with simplicity versus difficulty of the kata. If you're looking at the versions from Okinawa, pinyan nidan is the basic H form, essentially, very much like the even simpler kihon kata, which a lot of shorin systems use, about on a par with the difficulty of the gekisai / fukyugata, which were designed by Chojun Miyagi and Shoshin Nagamine as introductory for both styles, so that as they went into training, they could choose which path to go. But what happened was in a lot of, not most Okinawans don't do this, but it definitely happened in the Japanese iteration of the heians, is they switched not only the sequence, but the name. So what in Okinawa is called pinyan nidan, in Japan is called heian shodan. And so he put the simpler of the kata first in order to teach simpler things before more complex things. That's the rational way to approach teaching. I have seen recently video of some instructors who are with white belts who don't even have the foundation of a stance, haven't learned proper fist formation, much less trajectory of the punch and throwing the punch wildly and circularly. I have seen I have seen a few instructors who jump right in and want to teach advanced Ed Parker techniques to the white belt, or start a kata right away before you even have the student doing basic oisuki punches, or if you're using the more contemporary version, jabs and reverse punches and so forth. They haven't even learned the stance or the punch, or even be able to stand and run through a basic sequence of blocks, and they're already throwing them into kata, which is a complex bunch of turns and directions and a wide variety of techniques before they've even learned a single technique well. This is a problem with not understanding teaching taxonomy or pedagogy. Pedagogy is basically the organizational thought process of teaching. Taxonomy is the specific levels of teaching that you go through. And without going back to Bloom's taxonomy and the education system and so forth, just basically all it means is, first I need to set a foundation. On the other side, I've seen some really good instructors who, and they can make it exciting. So you may think, oh, that sounds boring and I want to keep my student engaged. If you do it properly, it's not boring. I've seen instructors that start just stance, okay? Starting with Heisokudachi, Musubidachi, Heikodachi, Zenkutsudachi, Shikodachi, and then going through a sequence of moving into those stances and sequencing them together. Or to stand and just learn to the timing and rotation of the hikite, the pulling hand, pulling in, and the rotation of the fist, whether you do a 3/4 or a tatezuki ishinru style, or a 3/4 seibukan style, or a full twisting seikenzuki, whichever fist you do, but whichever one you choose, they have to learn to do this before you start teaching them an advanced kata, and they have to do the turns and the steps, and they don't even know what stance they're in yet. So, as you see my guys back here, I've taught them first just basic hand switching on the bow. Can you guys do that? Just do the hand switching? That's what we started with. Then I started, switch a hand, go ahead and put your right hand under, and then they step forward and do a downward strike. And then they come back and they do a hand switch and they step left and do a downward strike. And I start them with that. I'm not going to jump in and start teaching Tokumine no kun or even Toma no kun, the old Ufugusku no kun. I'm not going to start teaching a kata because there's too many turns, hand switches in some cases to mess with a kata until they've learned this basic. Now take the forward down strike right and into the block, okay? And then step back, switch, forward down step into the strike, and shift into the block. And so I start them with this basic, and only After they've done this, now go to the bow position with the bow behind you, okay? And come around into prep position. And ready. Then up. Then downward strike, shift. Back with the return to the bow. And now I'm putting a sequence together. Okay, go ahead and keep working on what you were doing. And that's what they're kind of practicing back here to start with. And I'm going to set those foundations. But I don't even start the bow until they know Zenkutsudachi, Shikodachi, shifting. Once they can do that, I don't even start the bow until they have hammer fist strike, so they understand what that downward strike with the bow is. Or uchiuke, so they can do the block with the bow. So the empty hand, which correlates to what they're doing with the bow, had to be taught first in mine. You could go the other way. You could teach it with the bow first and then do it empty-handed. Both okay, but in either case, you're going to lay the foundation first, then begin building on that foundation. Now, how to do that without it becoming boring? That's incumbent on the teacher to engage, to be able to do just a straight punch, okay? Now we're going to step into the straight punch. Now we're going to C-step into the straight punch. Now we're going to straight punch twice. And to build on your own foundations in order to keep the interest of the student and make it engaging, that's on the teacher. That's your personality, that's your relationship with the students, that's your depth of knowledge of the situation, of the techniques that you're doing. Without that foundation, jumping right into a kata for a white belt who doesn't even know a punch and a block and a stance is premature and is only going to lead to confusion for the student, frustration for the teacher, and or sloppy technique, and eventually the student's not going to last very long. So lay the foundation, do it in an interesting and engaging way where you care about what your students are learning, and then you can build on those techniques. That's a proper teaching principle. Hope that helps. Use that as a guideline. Do the curriculum that you're still doing, but break things into smaller chunks. Make them edible bites. It's the old story. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Until next week, thanks for joining. Like, share, subscribe. And as always, like they are, let's keep practicing.